Oklahoma Gardening is a production of the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the land grant mission of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University, dedicated to improving the quality of life of the citizens of Oklahoma through research-based information. Southwood Landscape and Garden Center, Tulsa's source for great gardens, southwoodgardencenter.com, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping to keep Oklahoma green and growing.
We are behind the scenes planning for next season. In the meantime, we hope you enjoy some of our favorite shows from this last year.
Today's show will be a sweet one. In Stillwater, we travel to N40 Blackberries, a you-pick-it blackberry farm. Harry Deupree of Rejoice Farms in Mustang talks with host Casey Henches about strawberry varieties. We have tips for combating issues with fruit trees in the home garden. We identify and provide solutions for growing blackberries. And Barbara Brown bakes blackberry scones.
Good morning. Today we're a few miles outside of Stillwater at what is quickly becoming one of our area's must-visit locations, N40 Blackberries. And today we'd like to introduce the co-owner of N40, Darla Black.
Good morning, Keith.
Good morning, Darla. So tell us a little bit about your operation here.
Well, we have 4 varieties of blackberries that ripen over the season from the beginning of June until mid-July. We had these plants tissue culture grown in Washington State so that when they arrived to us, they would be free of any kind of plant pathogens.
You've obviously done that. I mean, the plants look beautiful, the berries are beautiful, they're awesome, they taste wonderful, and the place is just a delight to walk around and tour and enjoy. So, okay. Thank you for that. Now, I am curious a little bit, how in the world did you and your husband decide we're going to do our own U-pick blackberry patch?
Well, we visit a lot of U-picks. We're fruit lovers.
Okay.
And so we decided that we wanted to put in some of our own blackberries so we wouldn't have to travel. And my husband said, well, let's put in about 50 plants. And I replied, you know, it's a lot of work.
Okay.
We're going to have to trellis, we're going to have to irrigate. If we're going to do 50, we may as well do 500. And we ended up ordering 800. Okay. And so that's the beginning of N40 berries.
Okay, all right. So have you always been a blackberry expert?
Oh, no. In fact, as a child, my mother would make me go outside and I would sit on the porch and cry because I wanted to come indoors. But as I grew older and participated in activities with my children, I began to understand and love the outdoors and nature. So about 10 years ago, my neighbor had this beautiful flower garden.
Okay.
And I wanted to have nice flowers.
Okay.
Well, I saw an ad in the paper for the Master Gardener program with Payne County, and so I thought, okay, I'm going to sign up for this class and so I can grow flowers.
Okay.
And I did.
Right.
I became a Master Gardener. I have loved every minute of what I do. It was a good idea for the educational background to apply to whether it's my garden or my flowers or the blackberries.
Right. So if I want to come visit your operation, how do I do that? Talk about the timing and how do we find out more about you and
Sure.
this sort of thing.
So blackberries are only available between the beginning of June and mid-July. The plants finish their cycle and then they're gone. That's all
Sure.
there are. We do have a website, which is just N40berries.com, and a Facebook page as well.
Okay.
Our phone number's listed there. You can also give us a call and see what we're up to and what berries are available at that time.
Okay. So Darla, I'd love to thank you for having us out today. I want to thank you again for all of your work as a Payne County Master Gardener. And to our viewers, I would just like to say that the next time you're in Stillwater during blackberry season, this is really a must-visit destination.
This is Harry Deupree, and we are here at Rejoice Farm in Mustang, Oklahoma. And Harry, we're amongst your strawberries here. Why did you start growing strawberries? You have several different crops you're growing, but...
I grew a few before, but not on this scale. And I'd been involved with the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture on some other programs, and I got a call one day, would you be interested in doing some research for us on strawberries to try to pick varieties that will really work well, especially in, say, central Oklahoma. And I was pretty good on keeping records, and I think that had something to do with it. But the opportunity to get into it a little bit more really fascinated me.
So what we're looking at is actually a trial with the Department of Ag.
It is.
What is it that they're trialing exactly?
Well, they want to see what varieties will best grow in various parts of the state. There's a couple of us in this general area, and so we're trying 5 different varieties here. Steve Upson from the Noble Foundation was the one that came up with the varieties, and I think all of them are good. I'll be eventually asked what my favorite is, but it'll be based on the various aspects that I see, the taste and the growth and the yield and so forth. But
so they're all turning out pretty well.
They have. They're kind of fickle in certain weather conditions. Right now, mine, well, we picked them pretty well lately. And I think they're going to make a comeback. But we still have good blossoms, so that speaks well for the next 2 or 3 weeks, I think.
So what are some of the challenges with growing a strawberry crop?
Well, weather is certainly one of them, but growing them under plastic like this, that eliminates some of the problems of overwatering, and you can ensure that you get enough water.
Because there's drip irrigation underneath
drip
that
irrigation
plastic.
Every 12 inches. And I can also fertilize them that way. So we're watching those things real closely and soil test. And it's a good program. And the ones involved, I think, are really doing their very best to see that we get ultimate yields and accumulate good information.
And some of them produce at different times
They
little
do,
bit, right?
yes. Sweet Charlie is a very good one. It was our really first big producer.
So Harry, how do you distribute your produce here? Are you a U-pick or?
Mainly U-pick at this point. I do sell on the Oklahoma City OSU Farmers Market, but so far the U-pick has kept us pretty well picked down, so I haven't utilized the Oklahoma City market yet.
So if somebody wants to come get some of Rejoice Farms produce, what's the best way to find out what's available?
Usually just to give me a call.
Okay, all right. Well, it's a great place to come visit, and I know if you don't mind, I'm going to help you pick some of these.
I hope you will.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we're up here at the peach tree, and it is a beautiful example for a homeowner. You know, the homeowners that have a hard time doing a lot of the things that we need to do to get peaches to this size, and I'm excited that you have a nice big fruit that you've been harvesting lately, you said.
Yeah, it's been great this year. Last year we got 1 peach off of this tree, and this year I finally decided I would get that OSU fact sheet out and follow the directions. But you do have to spray it a lot early on to keep the insects down. And also when it got a little bit cold and it was blooming, we were worried about frost. We came out here and put a quilt on it at night
Yeah.
to keep it from freezing.
And that saved it, I think, because we did get pretty cool back in April. And but peach tree takes a lot of work to do. You got to select the right variety first of all, and then you've got to worry about keeping it pruned, keeping the frost out of it, and then taking care of the disease and the insects that you have to do. So to get a peach, this far along, I'm sure you're going to have to be spraying about every 2 weeks, and that's really what it takes. And there's some organic options there that can help, but to keep the foliage clean and keep the fruit good and clean and worm free, it does unfortunately take a lot of sprays to take care of the peach this much.
If I would have known how much work it was, I'm not sure I would have put a peach in, but right now I'm really enjoying the fruit.
Right, yeah, people come into our office and they want to grow their own fruit, and we try to tell them it's going to take a lot of work, not only from the spraying side but the pruning side and protecting it from frost and all the other stuff, and then you get peach tree borers. And this particular one, I see a little bacterial spot on it, but that's pretty common. I mean, you're out there spraying, and we've got a lot of moisture in the ground, in the air, and it's really just a covering. It's not going to hurt anything, but they'll still make a good peach pie or a good peach ice cream. That's for sure. On this tree, you also, down at the bottom, you see a little oozing that you see from the trunk, and more than likely that is a lesser peach tree borer that is getting in there. And again, pretty common with peaches and a lot of homeowner situations. Our growers are fighting that always, constantly fighting it. Luckily they can spray some sprays that they don't have to spray every 2 weeks, but maybe every month. That helps keep those off. But it's pretty common. Peach trees are, we're gonna start bearing fruit about this third year, and then if taken care of correctly, we're going to be able to get a peach crop for about up until about 14, 18 years old, and then they probably need to be taken out and revamped and start over. So,
well, I've enjoyed this one.
Great, beautiful example of peaches.
Blackberries are a favorite in Oklahoma, and joining us is Becky Carroll, who is a senior agriculturist who's doing research on our blackberries out here. Can you tell us what you're finding?
Well, we've got a lot going on this year. We've got some diseases showing up a little bit because of our cool, wet spring. We've had a lot of moisture. So some of these spots that you might find on the floor canes or the fruiting part, kind of purplish or gray spots, those are anthracnose. Fungicide applications will take care of that.
Okay.
We've also seen some leaf cupping on some of our primocane or the new canes that are coming up. And so there's a picture, or there's a example right here, and a few of the leaves are curling on the edges. And just today, we had those identified as caused by broad mites, which is a brand new pest for blackberries here in Oklahoma. They've been finding them in Arkansas over the last couple of years, but this is the first time we've seen them in Oklahoma. So we're not exactly sure how we're going to actually recommend control yet, but we're working on that. And if anybody's having problems with leaves that are cupping upward, that's probably what they're seeing. And I'd love to know if there's pockets or locations where they're finding leaves like that.
So we're kind of looking for that now in Oklahoma. And there's other insects that we've been dealing with.
Right. In the past, blackberries have pretty much been an organically grown crop. You didn't have to worry about spraying too much unless it's anthracnose.
I used to go pick wild blackberries all the time.
If you pick them in the wild, in the pasture or along the roadsides, you can still do that. You just may get a little extra protein with some of your berry collections.
So what is it that's in some of these berries?
It's called SWD, or spotted winged Drosophila, and it's a type of fruit fly that infects really nice berries. Usually fruit flies infect overripe or damaged fruit, and the SWD, it will actually slice into fresh, nice berries and lay eggs inside. So where we never have had a problem with that unless you've had damaged fruit or overripe or something with regular fruit flies, this is affecting a lot of the good berries. And all the monitoring that has been done in the last couple of years has been showing pretty high populations in most all of our blackberries especially.
Okay.
They
It's
like
not going
other
to harm
fruits.
you if you do
It's not
eat
gonna
it,
harm
and you won't
you.
even notice them. You don't see them, right?
You won't notice them that much. There may be a little bit of sunken area on some of the berries, but if you may notice them if you put them in your refrigerator in a bag. They may like crawl out of the berries. So
Okay.
it's not something you really want to think about, but more than likely you're going to have them in your plantings or in your canes if you're growing blackberries.
So how can we prevent them from?
Well, the best thing I would suggest would be plant a early ripening blackberry. The fly populations are a lot less early in the season, and as you get later, the populations build up. They can have one life cycle in about a week or 10 days. It's pretty quick turnover. And so early season, there's not as many, so you're not going to have as many infected berries. Later season, have more. But what we're recommending now is a weekly spray. When the berries start to color, when they start to turn blue, you're going to want to, or even before they turn blue, start applying a weekly insecticide, malathion, Mustang Max. There are a few organic options in Trust and Pyganic, and most of them have a 1-day pre-harvest interval, so you can spray them 24 hours later. They're okay to eat. Some of the other options are 3 days, so you'd have to wait before you could eat those if you sprayed them with another option.
Okay.
So there are options where you can spray them and eat them the next day.
All right. Well,
But-
so we might want to spray our homegrown blackberries.
And it will be weekly through the end of harvest.
Okay. Thank you for sharing
All right.
with us.
Today we're going to do blackberry scones. Now this is something a little festive, but you could use it for every day as well. And we're going to use things out of the freezer. If you have the fruit fresh, that works great, but this time of year often it is frozen. So I'm going to prepare a sheet pan in order for us to put them on to bake. I've got the oven preheating at 400 degrees. And I'm using parchment paper to keep them from sticking, but I always find that parchment paper wants to move off the sheet. So a little bit of butter underneath the parchment will hold it in place, and that allows us to work with it a little bit easier. I've got 2 cups of flour in a large bowl because I'm going to do some tossing and sifting with it, and I want to make sure that it stays corralled. To that, I'm going to add a half a teaspoon of salt, a 1/4 of a cup of sugar, and a tablespoon of baking powder. And as I said, I'll make sure we get it all in there. I'm going to whisk that together to make sure these are all blended. Back in the day, when I was being raised, Mom always insisted that these had to be sifted, and we have since found that whisking actually will combine the ingredients well enough. You do need to make sure that you aerate the flour as you're measuring it, since we use measures in the U.S. as opposed to doing it by weight. If you were to do it by weight, you wouldn't even have to aerate it before you measured it, because whether you add the air to it or not, it's going to give you the same amount. Okay, so we have those ready. Now we're going to add some cold butter to this, and I've got 6 tablespoons. And you do need to try to make sure that it's still fairly cold when you do this, because you don't want it to coat too much of the flour. You have options, oops, excuse me there, on how you cut this in. You can tell it's really cold because it's still really hard. You can either do it with a pastry blender, as I'm doing now, or you can do it with a couple of knives. But you're going to continue to do this until you get it into something that looks pretty much like fine crumbs. All right, we've got this into fairly good crumb stage. It's a little bit larger pieces than it is if you make biscuits. Scones and biscuits are very similar, but scones have more sugar in them, and biscuits usually don't have much at all. So next step is we're going to use some yogurt. And I've got, again, 6 tablespoons of, and this is just plain yogurt. You could use Greek if you have trouble finding plain, because regular plain has become a little bit more hard to find. And then 2 large eggs. And this is going to be the liquid component of this, so we're going to whisk these together until we get them fairly well blended, and then we'll just add those to the other and stir them together. Now, because we have some added sugar in here, it's not quite as critical as it is with biscuits that you treat it with as much care, because the sugar is going to help keep it more tender, whereas you overwork biscuits much at all and you end up with something that's pretty tough. So I just want to make sure that everything is well mixed. It looks like we're pretty much there. So these are, again, are going to go in here, and we're going to try to more or less fold them together, but there's going to be a bit of kneading at the end, so if you're going to need to actually stir it a little bit, that's going to be okay. All right. We want to make sure that everything is moistened. The egg is going to give it a little bit more structure as well. Generally in biscuits we don't have those either. So this is somewhat of a cross between a biscuit and other baked products, but it is traditional in some countries. In England you often hear mention of scones with their tea, although they often will call them scones instead of our usual American pronunciation. Okay, I think that's done enough. I'm going to fold in or combine in the next ingredient with this. I've got a cup of formerly frozen diced peaches. These were not diced when I started working with them. They were frozen in slices, so you don't need to freeze them in any special way. But when you're ready to cut them up, it's better if you try to do that while they are still frozen. You'll have a little bit better luck. And then I've got a half a cup of frozen blackberries. Now you'll notice that these are not in perfect pieces any longer, and that is my intent. I actually broke them up, because if it's in one big piece, then you're not going to get them dispersed through the scone mixture very well, and there you're going to have a few that have great big pieces and the rest that aren't going to have much. So this works really well if you've got frozen blackberries that have actually kind of fallen apart. Otherwise, you can break them apart while they're still frozen before you put them in, or we've got a few here that are still in fairly big pieces, and I'll just break them up a little bit while you're stirring it together. Got a little bit of dry mixture at the bottom, otherwise it looks like it's fairly well mixed. Just like with biscuits, we are going to knead them slightly. So I've got a little bit of extra flour here. We'll put a little bit on a board. And then get our mixture onto here and knead them just a little bit. Now the oven, as I mentioned, is preheated to 400 degrees so that you have the oven waiting for you rather than waiting for the oven. We're using a kind of baking powder that isn't going to react until it's heated, but still we don't want to have it sitting around at room temperature any longer than we need it to. So again, we're just going to try and form it into basically a circle. That's kind of our goal here, keeping my hands with enough flour. We're trying not to use any more flour than we need, but we want it to be formed well enough that it's going to hold together. The more flour you add to it, the more probability it's going to be that it's going to get tougher on you. All right, I think that's pretty well in a circle. Now, depending on how big you want them, and I'm going to take a moment and wash my hands here, but we're going to cut it into 6 wedges. And so the size you get is going to depend a little bit on, and how long it's going to take is going to depend a little bit on how big the circle that you have is. All right. Also want to coat our knife so that it will go through a little bit more easily, and you're simply going to cut it into wedges like you would a pie. Again, getting the fingers with a little bit of flour, and then transferring these over to our sheet that we already have ready to go. These are going to go in the oven. It's going to depend on the size and on your oven a little bit, anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes. They'll be done when they're nice and golden brown. I've got one more step that I want to take here, and that's I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of coarse sugar on the top, and it's more decorative, so that if you don't have any, that's fine. Regular sugar doesn't work as well. It tends to brown a little bit too fast, so something that's a decorator's sugar is going to work a little bit better. If it goes in between, it's okay. We're losing sugar, but we're not going to have anything getting burnt on the sheet while we've got it there. The reason partly for using the sheet is to help protect from that. All right, again, in the oven, 15 to 20 minutes. And when you're done, you're going to end up with something that looks like this. And I hope that as you approach the holiday season and the new year, you'll give these a try. It's blackberry scones for Oklahoma Gardening. I'm Barbara Brown.
There are lots of great horticultural events this time of year. Be sure and consider these activities when you're making your plans for the weeks ahead. Next week on the Best of Oklahoma Gardening, we'll be revisiting a few of the great horticultural projects of the Oklahoma City Community Foundation and the positive impacts that they have made on their local communities. Join us in for more TV You'll Grow to Love. To find out more information about show topics, as well as recipes, videos, articles, fact sheets, and other resources, including a directory of local extension offices, be sure and visit our website, oklahomagardening.okstate.edu. And we always have great information, answers to questions, photos, and gardening discussions on your favorite social media as well. Join in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find this entire show and other recent shows, as well as individual segments on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. And tune in to our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel to watch segments from previous hosts. Oklahoma Gardening is produced by the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University. The Botanic Garden at OSU is home to our studio gardens, and we encourage you to come visit this beautiful Stillwater jewel. We wish to thank our generous underwriters, Southwood Landscape and Garden Center, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry. Additional support is provided by Pond Pro Shops, Greenleaf Nursery and the Garden Debut Plants, and the Oklahoma Horticultural Society. We hope you enjoyed this video. It's part of our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. You can also find even more videos on our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.